Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hi, I'm Wendy. I'm a third culture kid from Germany who's now living in Singapore. I moved here for work around 2 years ago, and ever since filming my job hunting series, some of you have asked me about life in Singapore. I have gathered some questions and put them into several chapters, and I'll also include timestamps down below, but obviously I recommend to watch the whole thing because it's a whole playbook on how to set up life in Singapore. Grab some popcorn and something to drink because this will be a lengthy video. Alright, assuming the company has extended an offer to you, you guys have negotiated, you have signed the contract, and you're now about to move to Singapore. So what do you do now? How do we get you set up for Singapore? I think when I first moved here, I was pretty surprised how convenient everything is. It is so convenient. You can pay everywhere with Apple Pay, with Pay Now, you can call a Grab, you can call Grab Food, like everything is on a few of these super apps. You don't even need a MRT card to pay the subway, you just use your Apple Pay or your credit card like Visa, Master to tap. Amex doesn't work. And I think another thing that I felt so surprised by is that everything is so clean. You can clearly tell that this city was designed to be convenient and fast-paced. So the first thing I recommend you to do is to set up a local phone number, because you need a phone number to set up everything else. And this could be a temporary phone number as well. The next most important thing is to set up a local bank account. And I have been to many different banks. I went to DBS, UOB, OCBC, and whatnot, but only DBS accepted an IPA, which is a letter that you get from the government that states that you're able to work in Singapore. However, since I didn't have my physical visa at that point, I could only show this letter, and only DBS accepted my IPA. Every other bank said, no, you need your physical visa. So go to DBS and set up a local bank account. Once you receive your work permit, then you should sign up for SingPass. SingPass is an app that's designed by the government, and within this app, you can do everything. So basically, you can file for taxes, you can change your residency, you can sign up for broadband, like everything is connected to SingPass. Even opening an additional bank account, you can use SingPass. And every time you fly into Singapore, you will also have to fill out a form. But if you have SingPass, you can just direct the form to SingPass, fetch the data, and go back to the portal. And that way, you don't have to fill in everything manually. I find that Amazon is not that popular in Singapore, so instead we use Shopee and Lazada. You can basically get everything from these two marketplaces. Sometimes the prices vary, so you may have to check. Both of these e-commerce platforms always have some sort of discounts, so you can stack vouchers, you can get some sort of discounts. So feel free to check out the prices to see which one works better for you. Alright, let's talk about the most important thing, housing. How do you find housing in Singapore? If you had the chance to visit Singapore before you moved here, then I recommend you to download Property Guru and 99.co. Personally, I like Property Guru better just because I feel like the database is better. There are also like Facebook marketplaces, but I would use either of those two because those are licensed property agents. When I moved here in May 2023, it was the peak of all renting markets. It was so incredibly expensive because during COVID, all those other HDBs could not be built, and so hence everyone was renting places, including the locals. So when I moved here, I believe a one-bedder apartment costs around 3,000 to 4,000 Singapore dollars, excluding utilities. When it comes to housing, I could film a whole nother video, so if that's interesting for you, let me know in the comments down below. When you first move here, many expats tend to stay within the CBD area. But after staying here for a while, people may expand to further areas, such as Holland Village, River Valley, Bukit Timah, Tiong Bahru, or East Coast. Alright, let's talk about work culture and professional life. I feel like Singapore on its own is already a melting pot of cultures. So you get Malay-speaking people, Chinese-speaking people, English-speaking people, and Tamil-speaking people. And on top of that, you get all these expats rushing into Singapore from all over the place. It's a place with many cultures living together. And that's the beauty of Singapore. And since you have so many cultures working together, the work environment may differ from what you know from back home. And that's also how public holidays are scheduled. You get a few public holidays from every single culture. When you start working in Singapore, come here with an open mindset, because everyone has their own story, everyone has a background. And when you're coming from the West, say Europe or America, like even these two cultures are already so different, but then you get the Asian cultures as well. So see how you can build harmony around this at the workplace. When it comes to working in an office, I think it really depends on what industry you're in. So say if you're in banking, obviously it's more formal. But if you're in more like tech or fintech, it's more casual, and people sometimes show up with slippers. So it really depends on what industry you're working in, and that kind of defines the work culture. But overall, I would say Singapore is a rather fast-paced environment. People work fast and efficient. But in terms of life, I feel like it's slower than Hong Kong. So it really depends on what type of lifestyle you like. I think the beauty of a place that is hosting many expats is that the expat community tends to be very close together. Generally speaking, I find it very easy to network in Singapore, especially if you attend your industry's networking events, because you will always meet the same people. And say you want to meet someone outside of your industry, you can easily just reach out to them on LinkedIn, because chances are that you already have a common network. If you don't know how to reach out to people on LinkedIn, feel free to check out my job hunting series on YouTube. Networking in your personal life is also easy. You may join, I don't know, some private member clubs, or like you join a gym, or like you join some fitness workout groups or running clubs. Like, it's really easy to connect to people in Singapore. All right, let's talk about money and cost of living. I believe Singapore is one of the most expensive places to rent, next to Hong Kong, London, New York, and maybe Australia. And your rent can vary between 1,500 to like 4,500, depending on what type of housing you're looking for and also where you want to stay. Utility costs, I would say, are not above 100 per month, and broadband could be between $50 to $60, and phone plans could be between $15 to $30, $40, I believe. And in terms of grocery shopping, I would plan around like $300-400 per month, depending on if you're going out for food or also if you're traveling. However, eating out in hawker stalls is pretty affordable, and most of the locals like to go to hawker stalls because you get a variety of different local Singaporean dishes, and also at a very affordable price. So the prices range between $2 to $8, I would say. In terms of calling cabs, you can consider Grab, Gojek, Tada, or Zipcar. The prices may vary depending on how their algorithm is set up. And I would say from the middle of Singapore to CBD, it's probably around $10 to $15. And then from the center of Singapore all the way to the east to Changi Airport is probably around $25 to $30. Let's talk about lifestyle and daily life in Singapore. So something I haven't got used to since moving to Singapore is the weather. Some of you may not know that Singapore only has one season, or two if you count the monsoon season as well. Since Singapore is located on top of the equator, it's always summer, it's always humid, and it's always hot. So there's no need to pack any of your winter coats, your blazers, your sweater, nothing. You don't need that for Singapore. Some places might be cold because of AC, but normally it's bearable with a t-shirt. And I guess this is something I might never get used to because I love my four seasons. I love wearing trench coats and a winter sweater and whatnot. But I guess when I miss winter, I try to go somewhere further north. The infrastructure in Singapore is laid out really well. You can get everywhere by public transport, so I personally don't think that you need a car unless you have kids, because having a car in Singapore is actually quite expensive. Not only do you have to maintain the car and whatnot, but you also have to pay for the number plate. I don't know the exact process, but it's definitely not easy. So you can get away with just speaking English. No matter where you go, everyone speaks English. One thing you may have to get used to is Singaporean English, because the language is designed in a very convenient way, where they have their own vocabularies that I've never heard before. Okay, one of my favorite topics, food. When it comes to food, you will definitely not starve in Singapore. When it comes to hawker centers, they're laid out across the country, with some famous ones being Amoy Food Center or Zion Food Court. There are also other food courts that are more touristy, for example, Maxwell Food Center or Lau Pa Sat, but I think locals don't really go there. Feel free to check out my Singapore food tour. Now let's talk about social life and making friends. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to build up a social circle outside of your work. Because if you're here by yourself and all you have is your work, and then you also just hang out with your work colleagues, then your whole life involves around work. Assuming you don't have a family here. And you don't want that. You don't want to feel like everything you have is your own four walls and work, because that will eventually burn you out. So how did I make friends in Singapore? I've previously filmed a video on how I made friends as an adult. It's just that now that I've built up my social circle, I tend to be less outgoing and less aggressive when it comes to making new friends. But the tips and tricks I find very helpful still. Another thing to note is Singapore, for many expats, is a stepping stone. So many expats come here for maybe a couple of months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they move on to their next destination. So I would say sometimes it's really sad to see people leave, but it's part of life, and how I like to see it is just that this friend of mine is moving to another place, for example Korea, and whenever I go to Korea I can see her now. It has up and downs when you're living in a fast-paced environment like Singapore. Alright, let's talk about something more interesting. Dating life in Singapore. When I first moved here, many people asked me what I do on weekends, if I would go on dates. Truth is, for me it was more important to set up a social circle, because that's the circle that you want to fall back onto if things go south, you know. And so for me, I wanted to make friends first. And as someone with a more diverse background, I would say, it was difficult for me to date around Singapore. I would find myself stuck between different cultures. I would say one of the things that I struggle with the most is to keep myself calm while knowing that if my work permit gets withdrawn because of any reason, then I would only have 30 days to find a new job before I get kicked out of the country. So that's a pretty scary thing. If you think about, like, you have your apartment here, you have all your friends, your clubs that you signed up to, like, it's a pretty scary thing. And if you're not able to get a dependent pass, which you get if your spouse is working in Singapore, then it can be a little bit scary. But this is exactly why you need to cover yourself up when it comes to signing leases. Especially when you move here by yourself and all you have is your work and your apartment. And I don't know, maybe you're also working remotely, then you tend to forget that you have a life outside of Singapore. You still have the friends and family outside of Singapore. However, if you're zoomed into the picture and trying to set up a new life, you tend to forget that that still exists. So it could be in some moments where you feel a bit lonely or you feel like a little bit sad, but please don't forget you still have a life outside of Singapore. This is not a one-way street. If things go south, you can head back home or wherever your heart desires. Some things that you may be surprised about is that you can't buy chewing gum in Singapore. In fact, I'm not sure if it's illegal, but you can definitely not buy it in any shop. Another interesting thing is that you cannot buy alcohol in stores after 10 p.m. After 10 p.m. you can only get alcohol at bars. Also, alcohol is not cheap in Singapore because the government put pretty high taxes on alcohol. To sum it up, what apps do you need in Singapore? I think it should be ride-hailing apps, then obviously SingPass, then WhatsApp, because everything here works over WhatsApp. WhatsApp is important for setting up doctor appointments, setting up appointments with, I don't know, your landlord or whatsoever. When it comes to grocery delivery, I would download Cold Storage, FairPrice, Redmart. There are a bunch of different delivery services out there. So in a nutshell, Singapore is pretty convenient. Everything is handled on your phone. Alright you guys, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Bye.